welcome to the track. Today we are at Thompson Motor Speedway in Thompson, Connecticut. We're here for the final event of the SCCA season. Today we are going to talk about what it takes to get into motorsports photography. I have always been kind of a gearhead, been into motorsports and photography, and I finally, just this last year, decided to kind of put the two together. I'm not sure why it didn't happen sooner, but glad I did. I've been shooting over the past year. I've been to multiple SCCA events. I've photographed at a Pirelli World Challenge race at Lime Rock Park. I've photographed a NASCAR race at New Hampshire Motor Speedway, and I got to attend and photograph a Formula One race in Canada for the Montreal Grand Prix. All right, so to get started in motorsports, I mean, the first thing is you've got to find an opportunity. So either that's you're networking and you know somebody, or you're just checking to see around local tracks and see what events are going on. I got my start because I knew somebody that was involved in SCCA, so I was able to get to the track. But other than that, the Formula One race, I decided to just attend on my own. And some of these events, like this one today, I just decided to find my way here. So it's all about just finding opportunities and networking. All right, so you made it to the track, now what? So the first thing is you gotta visualize what kind of shots you wanna get. So you gotta think about ahead of time what you wanna see. If you haven't been to the track before, maybe you should talk to some of the drivers, find out where they think may be good spots, look for other people that are taking pictures that have been to the track before, and kind of find out maybe where the best kind of spots are. But basically you wanna visualize the shots that you wanna get ahead of time, so you're not spending all kinds of time running around the track while the cars are on track trying to find spots to take pictures, because you're wasting time while they're on track not taking pictures by running around the track. So definitely have a plan of attack so that you know exactly where you want to be to get the shots that you want to get while the cars are on track. All right, so next we're going to talk about camera gear and settings. So whenever I'm at this kind of event, I'm shooting with a Nikon D4. And I like to bring a good variety of focal length, so I bring everything from my 24 to 70 for the wider stuff, all the way up to my 200 to 500, so that I can get kind of everything from in the paddock, where in the pits where it's wide and it's close, to out on track when they're quite a ways away and I gotta get that reach. And I also have a 2x teleconverter so that I can convert my 70 to 200 or my 200 to 500 to a little bit more of focal length. Especially with long lenses like this, I'm usually not hand-holding this. I also bring a monopod that helps to kind of take the weight off your shoulders and your arms and helps you get more of a steady shot. A lot of times I find the monopod actually being better for getting those kind of panning shots of the race cars than having the vibration reduction, the VR on. Sometimes, especially with active mode, that tends to introduce some weird kind of artifacts into the image when you're panning. I find it better not to use that. So monopod is probably, I'd say, a must-have, especially if you're shooting on a longer lens like this, or even with a 70 to 200, if you're gonna be shooting for quite a while in a corner with a lens like that, holding it up with your arms will get tired after a little while. So definitely monopod would be a good choice. Then in addition to the monopod, I also bring extra batteries, plenty of storage because you're going to take a lot of photos. I bring lens pen for keeping my lenses clean, as well as a blower to keep the dust off the sensor as well as the lenses. And then just gray card, all kinds of other stuff that I may need to make sure that my shots come out really well. All right, so next let's talk about settings. So usually when I'm out on track, I'm shooting in shutter priority mode. This kind of gives you the ability to freeze action when you want to, but then also pan the camera with the car and get some cool blur action with the background, so you can really sense that motion. Then when I'm in the paddock or the pits, like over here, I'm usually shooting aperture priority, because generally in the garages you're going to have lower light, and you're also going to want to shoot kind of wider angles. So I'll put on one of my lower aperture lenses, like my 70 or my 24 to 70 2.8, and then I'll shoot kind of wide open so that you can also kind of blur out busy backgrounds when you're shooting kind of close up with all that stuff going on. So when you're shooting, definitely think about your settings. Faster shutter speeds is not always better shutter speeds. A frozen car on the track just looks like it's parked, so it's not as exciting to the person that's looking at the photos. So you want to think about probably starting around 1/500th, depending on what you're shooting, and then moving your shutter speed down to probably around 1/100th of a second, which will give you, if you're panning well, it'll give you some good motion. And then if you're adventurous, you could go even below that, and if you're steady enough, you can get some really cool looking shots where the background is completely blurred out, kind of like this shot here that I got at Lime Rock Park. Definitely when you're shooting with lower shutter speeds, you want to make sure you're using that panning technique. So because your shutter speed is lower, things are going to be blurring in the image that are moving faster when you take the picture. So if you're moving the camera with the car essentially is stationary in the frame, so the background will blur, but the car won't. So this is also going to be dependent on how good the autofocus system is on your camera. So you'll usually want to use continuous tracking and just think about how smoothly you're panning with the subject. Now when you are using that panning technique, because you're going to be using probably somewhere around 1/100th or maybe even a little lower if you want to get that cool blur effect, definitely think about you're probably going to have a pretty high aperture. It's going to probably be sitting anywhere from f/16 to f/22, so definitely keep that in mind. If you do want to get a lower aperture, what you'll probably have to do is lower that aperture, and then you'll have to increase your shutter speed. And now because you're going to be tracking and panning with those shutter speeds, you're probably going to want to also make sure that you're using a continuous burst setting on your camera so you can take multiple shots as you're panning through the motion of the car. This will help you make sure you get that 1 frame or 2 frames where it's in focus. And when you're trying to get those shots, focus is definitely key. You want to make sure that you're using a continuous focus that's automatically tracking. I usually use kind of group focus, so I'll use either 9-point focus or single point depending on what I'm shooting, so that as I'm panning, I can hold the back button focus or the shutter halfway, and it'll track the movement of the vehicle through the frame. When you're trying to get that shot with a continuous focus, make sure you're thinking about the composition ahead of time so you know what kind of shot you want, so you know where to put that focus group in the frame so you can get the shot that you want. And when you're thinking about focusing, usually you want to put your focus point on the part of the car that's closest to you. So if the car is coming at you, you want to focus on the front of the car as it's coming through the corner, or the side of the car if it's passing you. And choosing a focus point like that is important because that's generally where your eye is drawn to when you look at the image.
This is the first call to grid for Group 1.
As far as other settings, ISO, generally this can be at about 100. Unless it's getting darker or it's later in the day, you may need to boost that up so you can keep your shutter speed at a higher shutter speed if that's what you're looking for. For the white balance, I usually set it on auto, or I'll just judge it by how the light is that day. Maybe it's nice and sunny, I'll put it on daytime, or I may just put it on cloudy if it's an overcast day. Then as far as metering, I'll generally keep it on matrix because that seems to work just fine, unless there's maybe some changing light conditions where there's shadows or it's darker, and then I may use something like spot metering. Now with all this knowledge, you just got to get out on track and shoot. Definitely experiment, think about what kind of corners you want to capture, think about that tight, that middle, and that wide shot that you want to get, and think about how you can use things like shadows and reflections to make your shots more interesting. Next, make sure you're conveying the excitement of racing. Think about cars passing, sparks, damage, tire smoke, all that kind of stuff that really conveys what racing is really like, so that the person who's viewing your photos after understands what you're trying to convey through the picture. Lastly, get out there and enjoy yourself. Photographing race cars is a lot of fun, and generally racing is just one big community, so get to know people and enjoy yourself. And then make sure that you're taking breaks, you're eating, you're drinking, and you're resting so that you can be out shooting all day. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you guys have any questions or any comments, please leave those below. I'm going to post the gear that I use also in the description. And please let me know if you guys like this kind of stuff. What other stuff would you guys like to see? Any other ideas for videos that I can do? And please definitely subscribe if you'd like to see more. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.